Many of the activists and true believers in Hollywood are horrified to learn that the values and worldview they thought were virtuous and have spent years forcing upon the audience really aren't all that popular outside of their little bubble. Selena Gomez found that out the hard way when she decided to showcase her empathy for illegal immigrants of the criminal variety getting evicted.
I'm so sorry. I wish I could do something, but I can't. I don't know what to do. I'll try everything, I promise.
But rather than getting likes, she was ridiculed on the national stage for her shallow virtue signal. Someone else that had been doing a lot of virtue signaling in recent years is Kathleen Kennedy's Lucasfilm, something which has worked out no better for Star Wars than it did for Selena Gomez. Yet outwardly, Lucasfilm appears to have learned nothing. Let's look at the recent development on the Rey Palpatine movie and their other failures in the making. This video is sponsored by Incogni. Most of the key decision makers in Hollywood are starting to accept that they really were the ones out of touch, and they're scrambling to course correct, in the process increasingly falling in line with the new administration. As we saw in our previous video, which is linked to in the description, even Bob Iger himself kissed the ring of Donald Trump. Disney is a big kingdom though, and for Iger to bend the knee is one thing. To actually root the activism out of Disney is a much different matter. And as we shall see, Lucasfilm clearly hasn't gotten the memo just yet. But before we get into that, have you noticed how so many of the online ads you come across seem oddly personal to you? Well, there's a reason for that, and it doesn't stop with ads, because that's where the spam emails and maybe even automated robocalls begin, and it only gets worse from there. If you ever signed up for a newsletter, a website, or some other service, then chances are your data was resold without you ever agreeing to it. There's a shadow industry of data brokers aggregating, buying, and reselling personal data like your full name, email address, phone number, home address, SSN, shopping habits, online alias, employment history, financial information, and much, much more. And as valuable as that information may be for those trading in it, all you get out of it, of course, is spam, and even that is a best-case scenario. In the US in particular, your data may end up in public search sites, and health insurance companies are known to use some of that data as determinants of health, meaning your documented online activity may actually increase your rates. There is also the risk that your data sooner or later will be leaked in a data breach, where it's made freely available for outright criminals, putting you at additional risk for more targeted scams and even identity theft, where loans may be taken out in your name. The good news, though, is that no matter how they obtained it, you have the right to request that these data brokers delete the information they have about you. The bad news is that there are hundreds of them, and each and every one of them will try every trick to weasel out of deleting your data. And worse still, even if they do, there's nothing preventing them from collecting it again. The really good news then is that Incogni, this video sponsor, can take care of this for you. Incogni helps you protect your privacy and take your personal data off the market by reaching out to data brokers on your behalf, demand your personal data be removed, and plow through their objections as they come. And better still, they'll send repeat removal requests in case they should get a hold of your data again. And best of all, the whole process is automated. All you have to do is create an account, grant Incogni the right to work on your behalf, and kick back and relax while they do the work for you, keeping you up to date with the progress every step of the way. Since this video is sponsored by Incogni, we naturally have a deal for you. Use our code MIDNIGHT at the link in the description and you'll get 60% off an annual Incogni plan. So head down to the description and get your data protected now. With that, let's move on to Lucasfilm and their recent and future failures. There is a lot to get into here, as there has been a flurry of Star Wars news as of late, none of which will really get anyone excited, and all of which seems a little bit, well, desperate. Let's begin with the performance of the latest release, which should have turned everything around for them, but which did anything but. Leading up to the release of Skeleton Crew, what we kept on hearing from anyone with connections to Lucasfilm was that this is the one. They genuinely believed that Skeleton Crew was so good it was going to turn things around for Star Wars, and granted, there haven't been many complaints about the series being bad. On the contrary, many of those who have seen it place it up there with The Mandalorian Season 2. Problem is, hardly anyone ever saw it, and it ended up another total bomb in the ratings. In fact, it's the least seen live-action Star Wars series to date, underperforming even The Acolyte. That, of course, isn't indicative of the quality, or lack thereof, of Skeleton Crew, as no one bothered watching. It was flat out rejected unseen. That, of course, is a referendum on the popularity of the Star Wars brand itself, especially in the aftermath of The Acolyte, which was a complete and total disaster, both creatively as well as for audience confidence in the Star Wars brand, and Skeleton Crew paid the price for that. The challenge for Disney and Lucasfilm is that they now have 2 consecutive major flops, and there's no reason to think that is going to change. Perhaps that has led to some level of desperation. The big gun Lucasfilm had left after the sequel trilogy, and especially after the fighting of Gina Carano, was bringing back Obi-Wan Kenobi. Sadly for them, they already fired that gun, and it turned out to be a complete dud. Maybe it would have misfired anyway, but as WDW Pro reported at the time, it was originally going to be centered around Obi-Wan, Darth Vader, and a young Luke Skywalker, but due to Disney's internal DEI and on-screen representation policies, that initial concept was a no-go, as that would be too many white males on screen at the same time, and you just can't have that. So it was changed up, and in all likelihood made significantly worse in the process, as these weren't any kind of organic changes, so Obi-Wan didn't work out. Their next biggest guns were Ahsoka and Thrawn, and well, they kinda screwed that up as well. Moving way down to the last of audience draws then, we get to Padme, and the rumor, courtesy of Christian Harloff, here brought forth by That Park Place, that Lucasfilm wants Natalie Portman to reprise her role from the prequel trilogy in the 2nd season of Ahsoka. Their write-up reads, Harloff reports that Dave Filoni, the creator and showrunner of Ahsoka and Lucasfilm Chief Creative Officer, is eager to bring Portman back into the fold. This rumor comes on the heels of other casting buzz surrounding Ahsoka Season 2, including the possible returns of Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi, Hayden Christensen as Anakin Skywalker, and Ariana Greenblatt as young Ahsoka. According to Harloff, a deal with Portman is close to being finalized. The accuracy of this, I do not know, but I would be inclined to believe it, because considering how nothing works right now, they must be getting desperate. And that move, to me, seems like pure desperation, hoping against hope that Season 2 of Ahsoka won't underperform worse than Season 1 already did. We'll find out what happens with that in time. But before we move to the future, and the renewed attempts at making Rey work, let's move back to the past with James Mangold's Dawn of the Jedi, because Star Wars fans care deeply about the lore, and Mangold made some rather disturbing comments to that end. James Mangold, director of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, is attached to direct another movie for Kathleen Kennedy, namely a prequel set in the distant past, dealing with the rise of the Jedi in the first place. Now, this is an era that has been explored in the EU, so there is some lore of what happened in this era, and quite a few of the hardcore fans could no doubt be made excited for a project like this, if they stick to the lore at hand. Alas, Mangold has already promised that he will do no such thing. He spoke to MovieWeb about the project, and his comments were further disseminated by Deadline Hollywood, whose write-up reads, "As James Mangold makes his mark on a galaxy far, far away with his upcoming Star Wars installment, he's emphasizing the long time ago part of the setting. The 2-times Oscar nominee, who is set to co-write and direct Star Wars Dawn of the Jedi, recently teased that his prequel will aim to find a way on the page to say something original about the origin of the Force without relying too much on the franchise's established lore. To me, the really important aspects are the freedom to make something new. Screenwriter Beau Willimon and I, in relation to Star Wars, have been working on a script, and we'll see what happens, he told MovieWeb. The Star Wars movie would be taking place 25,000 years before any known Star Wars movies take place, added Mangold. It's an era and a playground that I've always wanted to explore and that I was inspired by as a teenager. I'm not that interested in being handcuffed by so much lore at this point that it's almost immovable and you can't please anybody. Here's the problem though, Mr. Mangold. If you don't stick to that lore and find a way of making a great movie within the confines of said lore, chances are we'll be looking at another movie that is going to perform like Dial of Destiny. This is one example of what I mean with that Lucasfilm has learned nothing because the fanbase is already bruised and battered. If you want to win them back, then a movie set in the way distant past is a legit way of doing that, since it's so far removed from the sequel trilogy and the Acolyte. Though knowing Lucasfilm, that is exactly what the Mangold movie will be building towards anyway, because it was announced alongside the Rey movie and the Filoni Mandiverse movie. 3 movies in a sense representing the past, present and future of Star Wars, all interconnected to reframe the narrative in the image of Kathleen Kennedy. This then is a movie where we really needed to hear a new writer has been hired to do a page 1 rewrite, because everything that has been said about this thing in public is fit only to erode trust, not renew it, and that is the last thing that Star Wars needs right now. The fact that there is no trust is quite clear in the reception to a newly announced Star Wars project. On January 21st, The Hollywood Reporter had the exclusive scoop that Sean Levi of Deadpool and Wolverine fame is attached to direct another Star Wars movie and that Ryan Gosling is in talks to star in it. Will they be enough to get a despondent fan base back into Star Wars? In my opinion, they certainly won't, because as of now, no one believes for a second that this movie will actually happen. This is another lesson that Lucasfilm just isn't learning. Too many times have they soft-announced projects in the entertainment trades by way of leaks and sometimes even hard announcements by way of official press releases. Yet almost always, these projects implode and never end up happening. It's gotten to the point that the best chance any potential Star Wars project has of being scrapped and never happening is being announced in the first place. Little is known about this project though, yet The Hollywood Reporter writes, it is unclear when Levi's project is set. Star Wars stories have run the gamut of hundreds of years, detailing the goings-on of a galactic republic turned dictatorship turned rebellion. It's also unclear if it concerns Jedis and their enemies, the Sith. It is, however, to be unconnected to the so-called Skywalker saga, the story centered on well-established and beloved characters like Luke Skywalker and his father Anakin. It is meant to be a standalone movie, sources tell The Hollywood Reporter. Lucasfilm, which was the source, had no comment on any impending deal or the project's details, beyond what they already shared, obviously. For the time being, I will assume this project also never happens, and move on to the one project that really shouldn't happen, but which very well might. The biggest problem for Star Wars is Rey Palpatine. The sequel trilogy, which debuted with The Force Awakens now 10 years ago, was pure brand destruction from which there can be no way forward. Or that is, there is a way forward of course. Disney can blow all the money they want on movies set in the aftermath of the sequel trilogy, but they'll never get that money back, as no one will be watching them. For the Star Wars franchise as a whole, the sequel trilogy is a cancer that has already spread and done major damage, and if the patient is to make it, however crippled after the fact, that cancer has to be removed. Pretending it isn't there isn't going to cure anything. Alas, Disney and Lucasfilm are doing just that, pretending the sequel trilogy isn't the problem that it is. And however unfair it may be to the actress Daisy Ridley, Rey Palpatine is the face of that problem. The ultimate sign that Lucasfilm hasn't learned anything then is that the Rey movie isn't scrapped yet. We were all hoping it would be, but Deadline Hollywood dashed our hopes on January 24th with their story, Star Wars Daisy Ridley Project Still Alive, with scribe George Nolfi. Dear God, this movie changes writers like other people change underwear. The article reads, despite the fast tracking of Sean Levi's standalone Star Wars movie with Ryan Gosling in talks to star, the Daisy Ridley Rise of Palpatine sequel is getting another pass, this time by writer George Nolfi. Sharmeen Obaid Chinoy is still attached to direct the story about Rey Skywalker, set 15 years after the events of 2019's The Rise of Skywalker. The plot is rumored that Rey, the granddaughter of Emperor Palpatine, will oversee a school of Jedis. Yeah, what I'm not seeing here is any kind of course correction. All I see is development continuing along the same path that drove the audience away in the first place. That is not to say that nothing might be happening behind the scenes. Maybe none of these projects will ever see the light of day, but outwardly, right now, Lucasfilm is sending the world a very clear message. We have learned nothing, and we will continue to fail. As we saw in that earlier video, Bob Iger may have kissed the ring, but his house most certainly has not. He better get it in order. Let me know if you think any of these projects will see the light of day in the comments. And before you go, don't forget to protect your personal data with Incogni. Use our code MIDNIGHT at the link in the description and you'll get 60% off an annual Incogni plan.